So we're excited after this year's work to present this to you. It's over 300 pages. If you don't have the link, you can pretty much type in the report, the name of the report, and it'll pull up the PDF copy either on the Department of Agriculture or the Department of Interior website. And I apologize that I was telling Natalia I should have put the title on this as for the Healthy Air Partners. Oversight on my part, but really want to recognize the number of individuals that are here today. So thank you very much. The report came out yesterday, and the commission members are now in the process of really reaching out to stakeholders and interested individuals that want to really know more about the report. So that is part of my role as a commission member, and my position on the commission is representing wildland firefighters. So if you don't have a copy, but please by all means download it, take a look at it, and I will be focusing mostly on the public health implications and identifications of mitigation and management of both wildfires and use of beneficial fires. So a little background on myself. Well, here's the commission members. Again, 50 commission members. I think we had roughly 500 people apply for the commission. So about 10% were selected. And the unique thing about this commission is it's really made up of a very, very diverse group of people from the federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies, nonprofits, academics, researchers, and significant stakeholders that are involved in wildland fire management. So a little bit of background on myself. I've spent 35 years as a federal employee for both the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service. The last 14 years of my career, I was the Chief of Fire and Aviation at Yosemite National Park, where we used quite a bit of fire on the ground, both lightning ignited fires as well as prescribed fire as our primary tool for enhancing the forest health and resiliency of the landscape. So really excited part of my career, but I'm also a fire behavior analyst, so I'm very interested in protecting communities and firefighters. So my background is really forecasting and predicting fires and smoke impacts. I'm also the vice president of the International Association of Wildland Fire. Next year, I will take over as vice president, in a really opportune time for me to be involved internationally as we're dealing with wildfires worldwide. I'm also the co-founder and past president of Grassroots Wildland Firefighters. We're an advocacy group that really spends a lot of time working with the public as well as congressionals and elected officials to advocate on benefits, pay, classification, mental health and wellness, expanded workforce, all these things that are very, very important comprehensively for a robust federal wildland firefighters. Now that we're really in the opportune time as mega fires are really impacting so many communities worldwide, we really have to recognize the workforce, behind the folks that are doing the work. And then in my spare time, I'm also working as a prescribed fire burn boss for the Nature Conservancy as part of the North American fire team. And we are also expanding internationally, doing work in what's called Women in Fire training exchanges. And this year, we did our first international training exchange in South Africa. So a big part of my work is also advocating for gender equity in the wildland fire organization. So the themes with the commission, this is a very, very comprehensive, but a really good overview of the different themes that really emerged over the last year that's going to guide us. again, into the future. We're really in need of urgent new approaches that are comprehensive, that really include a lot more people in this space of wildland fire management. So it's not just a federal issue, it's not just a public land management issue, but it's really very holistic. We have to think about how we incorporate a lot more partners into the sphere of wildland fire. This collaboration and shared decision making, again, we're so used to, we being the federal land management agencies, of operating in a space of decision making at a very local level. But we know that those impacts are really having profound impacts to local communities, and we have to really emphasize the need to share that decision making with communities. Proactive action is really came up quite a bit, in that when you look at the sphere of wildland fire, there's a lot of mitigation planning, community wildfire protection plans that go on before a wildfire event. We haven't really invested like we should in terms of the work that needs to be done at a local level, even before an event. Now that we're seeing these events in Paradise and Lahaina, really severely impacting communities, we really have to think about and place more human and physical capital prior to the event in order to help mitigate the severe consequences of a wildfire when it does approach our communities. And so this is a piece that is really beginning to take shape, as well as these communities that also are going to need help post-fire, especially as it impacts watersheds and drinking water. Enabling beneficial fire, we've really kind of struggled with this term to some degree. You've heard of prescribed burns, wildfire that's being managed for resource objectives, wildland fire use. There's a number of different terms, but this was also a pretty big interest of mine, because I've spent my entire career in doing prescribed burning and getting good fire on the ground. There's just such a big lift to this because of smoke impacts to communities and human health, but we still need to be able to figure out a way to use beneficial fire on the landscape to help mitigate the big mega fires that we know are just waiting to explode in the years to come. And we know that beneficial fire has a significant impact on reducing both the amount of smoke and the impacts to community, and also increases the resiliency on our landscapes. Workforce, there's a lot of this that's in the news these days about equitable pay. The federal workforce is one of the themes that really emerged in terms of increasing the pay and benefits for 18,000 federal wildland firefighters throughout the nation. We just cannot keep paying people, $15 to $18 an hour. Most service and retail workers are making more than that. So in order to kind of create both the recruitment and retention, of a highly specialized skill set. Linda, are you waving at me? Oh, sorry. Okay. Feel free to interrupt if you want any sort of clarification. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go along, but we'll have some time too. So the workforce, people are really recognizing the need for the mitigation workforce, people that are working in their local communities or rural communities, of expanding opportunities for young adults to work in conservation and natural resource management, not just a response organization as a wildland firefighter, but also protecting the things that we hold sacred and have value in our communities. We really need to expand that. So that's our current workforce is certainly important from maintaining the institutional knowledge and passing that along to our next generation. So it's an important part of the work that we see. Modernizing tools for decision making. There's a lot of data out there that really needs to be consolidated. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for private sectors and philanthropy to really look at how we partner with NASA, NOAA, and many other science organizations to really use the latest and greatest technology that we can implement in terms of land management, especially for enhancing resilient landscapes. And then investing in resilience and dedicated and sustained funding. This is going to be the harder lift, as this has to do with congressional appropriations and how we think about this investment long term. And I really like to tell people that we have to really think about this as a 50-year, horizon. It's taken us 120 years to get here with our, our old mantra of fire suppression and put all fires out, immediately, but we haven't really fully understand the environmental and ecological impacts of doing such in our landscapes that are fire adapted. So we're really going to need a holistic view of an investment of human and fiscal capital, both from Congress, from the states, from the federal government, from local entities, NGOs, and private institutions. So those are the primary themes. And again, lots in the report. Each of those themes are called out individually and with a number of different recommendations to Congress, close to 150 of them. Okay, next slide.
Ellie, this is Gary. If I can interrupt with a question, thank you for your comments on beneficial fires. I get the strong message that those play an important role in better forest management as well as better resource management. If I heard you correctly, you alluded to the fact that beneficial fires may have the smoke from beneficial fires may have less negative health effects. Could you expand on that, and particularly the management of smoke from beneficial fires versus smoke from unintended fires or uncontrolled fires?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for that question, Gary. If we really think about what's so how did we get here? So like I'm being asked all the time from reporters, is it climate change? They really want to corner me that climate change is really causing this wildfire crisis. It is a part of the three-legged stool of this trifecta. But if we think back of the early turn of the century, in the 20th century, United States was the primary timber producing capital of the world. So we did a lot of high grading and removing the large trees on the landscape. And what that did is it allowed for a lot of the understory growth to really grow up over the last 120 years. Combine that with aggressive fire suppression. The trifecta is we have second growth generation that is unsustainable in terms of insect drought, disease, and wildfire, and now an aggressive fire suppression policy that has basically exterminated the beneficial use of fire on the landscape. And now we have warming climate, longer fire seasons that's really creating this impact. So how does that relate to the question that you just asked? So mega fires are occurring in areas that typically would have seen beneficial fire, lightning fires, and or cultural fire through indigenous use of fire practices for baskets, food, hunting grounds. That's all been taken away. So we find ourselves in the fact that in these large areas that would have normally seen fire return intervals of every 5, 10, 15 years, imagine now that it hasn't seen fire in 100 years. So vegetation keeps growing, and now we're finding ourselves in a really untenable situation. So in order to reduce the really high impact wildfire severity in August, in those extreme months, which we don't, as firefighters, we have very few options. So it burns until the season changes, it gets cooler and drier in the fall. And so what we notice and what we can determine from both science and research is that if we can expand the use of applied fire on the landscape to begin reducing that unnatural fuel buildup and reducing some of the density of these tree stands, not to say that this is only one tool, But now that we've actually applied fire on the landscape to start that regenerative process of putting fire back on the landscape, those now act as buffers or footprints. So when a wildfire does reach those treated areas, it doesn't have as much momentum to continue through a treated area. And essentially what that does then, because you've treated that area, you have trees that remain on the landscape that can really absorb that future impact and reduce the smoke, because it's not burning with the same high intensity that a wildfire would burn. Sorry to go on a long explanation there.
That was helpful. One clarifying question, and I apologize, I could distract this conversation with a whole bunch of technical questions, but I'll try to limit myself. You'd said secondary growth is replacing the old growth. Are those a different set of species of plants that are growing, or just the next generation of the same species, or it depends?
It's a little bit of both, for sure. When I was working in Northern California with the Karuk tribe, doing some indigenous cultural burning with them, really noticing really large Doug fir that's second growth, but it's overtopping some of the oaks. So if you kind of think about that second generation, oaks are going to have a tough time. They can't really outcompete the conifers. So those are some of the things that we're looking at too, is removing, even though fire can't remove some of these larger trees, nor would we want, can we sequester some of those larger trees or those second growth species and utilize that carbon in a sink in building housing material, or using that, locally for another use. So it's a combination of both. Yes, it's definitely second growth, and certainly some invasive species as well that wouldn't have normally grown there. But with climate change, what we are seeing is some of these species are now finding themselves at higher elevations, which they normally wouldn't have been at.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for the question. I could do the same thing. I'm very, very intrigued by natural resource management and the use of fire, and how we think about resilient landscapes in the future, and really reducing impacts to human health in our communities. Briefly, this is the report organization. So you'll see these different chapters: the Foundation for Success, Protecting Human Health, and I will go into those in a little bit more detail with all of you today. And then responding to fire, recovering for resilience, and the framework for the future. And this is where groups like yourselves, you should be able to see yourself throughout this report. And again, talking to Natalia, it's like working with all of you to find ways to network and interject the work that you're currently doing, and anchor some of that to this report to actually help bolster your ability to amplify the work that you're doing. And I think that's really a very, very important part of the report. Okay, next slide. I'm going to kind of keep skipping through here, but it's definitely a crisis, and we're seeing this really expand exponentially these last 10 years, especially in the amount of structures that have been destroyed and lost over the last decade. Next. At the same time, fire is an essential natural process, and in many landscapes can and does play a vital role in helping mitigate risks to people and communities. Restoring our ecosystems is one of my lifelong goals that I've been working on ever since I started in the 80s. And I'm really beginning to learn more about sustaining indigenous cultural practices. That has also been largely exterminated, through the 30s and 40s. Indigenous cultures have been using these landscapes, have been burning these landscapes for many, many generations. And taking that out of our system is also having a negative impact. So we find ourselves in a paradox, which fire is both central to the crisis and one essential is part of the solution. So chapter 2 is protecting public health. I actually was not on this particular work group, but a lot of really good things have come out of this chapter in terms of thinking about like new and novel ways of protecting public health. One of the things I focused on today was increasing public health capacity as well as addressing smoke impacts. In the report, you'll see these different recommendations, and it's kind of natural to go directly to some of the recommendations that pertain to the work that you're doing. Rightly so. We're also still taking feedback about the report. You can send that directly to me. I actually haven't checked with the coordinators yet in terms of how they want public input on the report yet, but that should also be posted on the website. So this recommendation 39 is providing for funding for health agencies to address the impacts of wildland fire, to authorize and fund cooperative programs between federal agencies, emergency and land management, to better align with all of our programs and goals. We've been operating, a lot of us operate in silos. We haven't really reached out to each other. Obviously, all of you have done a great job with your partnership, given the folks that are on the call today. And how do we memorialize that? How do we better share information and cooperate together so that we're also addressing, myself personally as a practitioner, I'm absolutely very concerned, with firefighter health, community health, and how can we share that information. In the past, I don't want to say we've been shut down, but the standards and the regulations have been so strict that it's been very, very difficult to implement some of the work that is very, very urgent and necessary. So we really need to think about how we can better integrate our mission and our goals together. Okay, next slide. And recommendation 41, again, the proactive use of beneficial fire, and really working more hand in hand with some of the federal agencies. Now I know that EPA, Erica Sasser from EPA was on the commission with us as well. So it was exciting to work with her and the work that she is doing at EPA and understanding the impacts of, like, we are going to have impacts. It's how do we reduce those impacts to the point we can still get work done and yet really take into strong consideration that smoke has on our communities. This one I really like. The recommendation 43 is investing in new community and individual preparedness efforts. I think this is going on in small little areas throughout the United States where air pollution control districts are really working with their communities to create, clean rooms or clean areas. This is really an area that's emerging that I really like. I know that homeowners, were working on better filtration systems, but not everybody has the capacity to do that. And the biggest part about this is realizing that we have to come together with public communication and engagement opportunities. We can't just shut everything down. That's how we got into this spot in the first place. And so helping the public understand that there's a necessary balance. If you look at wildfire as two sides of one coin, we're really trying to limit the impact of smoke impacts on our communities. But at the same time, we also need people to kind of rise up and demand that we need to take action to reduce the future negative impacts of huge wildfires by actually accepting the use of beneficial fire on the landscape. Okay. So I really, I already kind of talked about this, but how do we mitigate the wildfire impacts to both landscapes and communities? And this is just going to be a hard convincing argument, but I think the more that we can share information and recognize that there is no way out of this. There is no fire option, but there are options that we can use to really create more of an interest and excitement, if you will, for beneficial fire. But the thing I get from so many communities is, you know, as a wildland firefighter, if you're part of a incident management team, or you're a firefighter that goes and suppresses fire, you're kind of seen as the hero. And here I am trying to be a knowledgeable fire practitioner by putting good fire on the ground. I'm often seen as the villain because I am impacting, you know, people's lives and communities with fire. So it is important that you know, we are the underdog, and at the same time, we need to shift the narrative from, look, we know ecology 101, vegetation is going to keep growing, and if we don't do something, both with fire and biomass utilization, certainly there's areas where we can, you know, remove biomass and sequester that, especially at a local community level. But this is the piece that's really most intriguing and the hardest thing, both with you know, regulators and with communities to really put this forward. Okay, next slide. So the takeaways on our report is 148 consensus recommendations. That was a hard process. If you can imagine 50 people trying to put forth unanimous consensus on recommendations. There's a lot of discussion in our group of recommendations that didn't make the report. Still quite important, but we really wanted to make sure that we highlighted the things that that we all had unanimous consensus on, and that's the important part of the report. But as you can imagine, 50 people with very diverse opinions and views and backgrounds and skill and expertise, you're going to have some conflict there. And that was good as well. You know, not all those made the recommendations, but it's a good start. And again, no single recommendation should be considered alone. Again, we kind of saw that circle that we're all connected. Both from the recommendations and chapters and the emerging themes. And so the themes provide a more accessible way to encapsulate our work as a significant body for this report. Next. So there is my contact information and the commission website that you can go and find all the commission members. I believe their email is also available if there's individuals or unique entities that you're interested in communicating with. Most of those, we are impaneled as part of the commission for another 6 months. We will likely give congressional testimony. We'll be reaching out to groups like yours and others, being asked to give a presentation, you know, on the commission report and create the dialogue and any questions that people may have. So really want to thank you for your time. And at this point, I will open it up for any questions, and maybe Natalia or Diane, you can kind of help me guide through some of the questions or comments. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That was incredibly helpful. The first hand I saw was Linda, so I'm just going to go ahead and call on her. You're on mute, Linda.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate this presentation. Very informative. I'm wondering if either the commission or you spoke about the whole issue of thinning as a complement to prescribed burns, and if you did, what the implications are in terms of biomass and our public health concerns about biomass.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see that in the recommendations under landscapes. And I was actually on that work group as well. There was 10 work groups. And we know that definitely fire is not it's a tool, but biomass and understory removal, especially in and around communities, is a very, very important part of this process. So we did talk about that, and I believe where I'm most interested is how do we look out the window and see a raw material available to be removed that can also reduce the fire intensity around communities as well as smoke, and sequester that locally for any number of emerging biomass industries that are available. So I think there's an opportunity for state, local, and private funding to think about new and novel ideas to expand the use of biomass, especially at a local community. And where this is really going to come into play is creating place-based local collaboratives. So people locally are very supportive of removing biomass from the landscape. Hopefully it will withstand future lawsuits, if that makes sense. It is an important part of the equation for sure, is removing biomass as well, and figuring out how to use that in an effective, efficient way.
Thanks for the question, Linda. Thanks, Kelly. Next hand I saw on the list is Gary.
Thank you. Kelly, in going through the slides, you'd had a slide up that talked about improving the usefulness of air quality alerts for wildland fire smoke. Can you expand on that recommendation?
Yeah, I wasn't part of that group, but one of the things they're thinking about is, I don't want to make this as an analogy, but we have amber alerts, right? That gets put out to the public from an emergency standpoint of view. So that's one thing that we're trying to grapple with, is the technology to inform people, of a smoke event or a wildfire event, I should say. But the tools that are really starting to emerge is coming out of air resource advisors, and being able to forecast where smoke is going to settle in the communities, and helping people prepare 2 or 3 days ahead of time if they need to leave their residence, if they have the ability to stay in their residence, and know that, hey, we're getting a forecast that we're going to have really unhealthy air. How do we work with the local air pollution control districts and air resources boards to inform communities, of these smoke events? So that's where I think you're going to see more of a request by Congress to really enhance that forecasting ability for community members to be more prepared, as well as to harden communities for safe places with clean air.
I'll just say that the forecasting and communication to the public, that's kind of us. So as you're moving forward this recommendation, I encourage you to think about people on this call as resources to implement that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Gary. And I don't have like the magic sauce about how I pull all the network of people together that can really make this happen. So the conversations I've been having with people is think about how you might be able to be the tip of the spear and start bringing people together and work with the elected officials to say, hey, this is in the report and we want to be a part of this. And how do we, come together as a core group of people to actually make this functioning and propel it forward into the future?
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Before I go to the next question, just really quick, Kelly, I know you shared your email at the end of the slide. Is it okay if we put it in the chat for folks?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, okay. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. And then the next hand I see is Layla and Pretty.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for a very, very informative presentation and well presented. And I really think you're a great spokesperson for this report. Really appreciate it. And I don't want to belabor too much because I know we're running out of time. But listening to you, again, it brought up all the need to collaborate. And this is what it is. And it builds off of actually the conversation kind of led to my point, is that we can definitely amplify the message, but we also need additional tools and ways to amplify it. Number one is educate us, which this is one example. The other one I was going to suggest, I'm representing Climate for Health here, but I do wear multiple hats, and I'm the chair of the Children's Environmental Health Committee of the American Public Health Association, among my other roles with the APHA, and I know Don is here listening to me, and I'm sure he's going to agree. The American Public Health Association, which many of these people are member of, is really a good group to partner with for multiple reasons. One of the ways I'm going to suggest quickly is that we develop policy statements, and that comes from the members. So something like this is new to many of us at the American Public Association, but we know that this is a critical existential issue that we need to work on. And some of the questions that Gary asked, about the wildfire issues, preventive fires and stuff. Many of us have those questions. We don't have the answers. So I want to be able to offer to you a process where we can engage the public health community, which is part of this community. So, developing a policy statement. If any of your colleagues is already a member, or if you're not, I will encourage you to be one. And then in the environment section, we can help you develop a policy statement. And what this does is that it's like a peer-reviewed publication. It has all the references, literature, and it really makes a good case why this is important, and this is how we can tackle it. And it can be lifted up in many different ways. One way is Don Hoppert is the government relations person. He can use that to make the case on the Hill. And we as members use the tool in presentations like this. Many of us serve at certain positions where we're listened to and give presentations. So I tried to be fast, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I wanted to suggest to you. Don, did you want to jump in or anything, or that's all good for you?
I put this in the chat as well, but we do an annual conference every year in which people from our membership and others come and present on all types of reports and scientific findings, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be something for you all to consider. Now, our conference is coming up soon. This year, it's in mid-November in Atlanta, but I think there's still time. I know there's still time to register. I'm not sure about the deadline for presentations and stuff like that, but perhaps Layla and or folks within the environment section may have a forum that you all could consider participating in or presenting through, whether it be this year or next year.
Definitely next year, but this year, is a little tight, but I can bring it up with our environment section colleagues and see if there's any, like a cancellation of an abstract or something, we can incorporate it, because it's a critical issue. And it's even too late. We have late breaker policy statement development. We missed that. There are deadlines that are, because it's in November, so there's not much time, but I will explore it. And thanks for your support, Don. It seems like, this is a critical issue that would help to bring to the membership. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question there, and you're so right, is amplifying. And understanding the nuances of both the report and the work that you're all doing, and how do you turn that into position papers, advocacy work with elected officials, because we have a lot of white space in front of us right now. And I think that's why I think this report is so critical, is that it can really offer a springboard where so many people came together to put this report together, that you're going to see the concerns that all of you have been talking about for years is right there in front of you. And so I really like the way that we can organize, number one, in a presentation, and then number two, in breakout sessions. And how do we, like the report said, it's not the end, it's just the beginning. And so all of you are part of our community now, in that, okay, where do we go from here? And folks like myself, I'm sure you can get a hold of Erica Sasser from EPA, who is on the commission, who knows a whole heck of a lot more, and as well as all of you, about public and human health and firefighter health from wildfire. So, but I'm always happy to give in-person presentations. I'm super cheap. I don't cost anything except for the cost of travel. And I'm always willing to do, a presentation for annual meetings, no problem, or virtual is fine too.
Thank you so much. I know we're running short on time, but this is so valuable. So I'm going to just keep questions going because I've heard folks. The next one I saw is Brittany.
Hi, I will be quick. So I focus on indoor air, and I look forward to the report. I haven't looked through it yet, and I work with Diana at the American Lung Association, and so ASHRAE, the sort of the trade association for the heating and air conditioning folks, this week they're taking the comments on. They have recommendations to protect building occupants from smoke during wildfire and prescribed burning events. And we're putting in some comments and some helpful stuff, but just sort of wondering if you guys collaborated on any of that, or if any of that synergy. I know I was looking through sort of the people who put this recommendations together, and there are some EPA people on it, but just, wondering if you guys collaborated, or if you had any thoughts on sort of keeping people safe in their indoor air environment, or if you're going to kind of let ASHRAE, which is not governmental, but sort of operates that way, in mind when you give your presentations and put out the report.
Yeah, I would take a look at the public health and infrastructure group, that particular work group, because I'm now intrigued by the industry of HVAC and the quality of indoor air. I don't know if we got into that kind of detail, but now I'm intrigued by that, because the one thing we kept kind of talking about was portable air filtration systems within the house, but in the event of a smoke event. But I don't remember conversations being centered around the whole system of indoor air, let alone, smoke from wildfire and prescribed burning. But it's intriguing. I think it's an opportunity for businesses to think about how we expand on that, given the, DC, the East Coast was full of bad air, and that wasn't even from the United States. So I think we can relatively be assured that these kind of events are going to continue to happen in the future. And what do we need to do, or what should we do as businesses, as communities, to better protect the ability for people to actually have clean indoor air, let alone those that may not have the fiscal resources to protect themselves. Good question, though. Very good question. It's intriguing for sure.
Yeah, I'll put their sort of recommendations in it's long. It's like 50+ pages, but in case you're interested in looking at it, it's very specific to wildfires and prescribed burning.
do you know if they actually put that into the one of the recommendations when it was open for public comment for public health and infrastructure? You know, if did it ever get to the commission?
That I'm not sure.
Okay.
They are soliciting comments from the public now for a month and a half on these recommendations. So
Okay.
they're not finalized yet, but I
end up raising my hand and saying yes too often, but I would go ahead and look at the commission members that are posted on the internet that on that site and find the folks that worked on public health and infrastructure and see if you can't email them that paper and see if you can get some kind of feedback from them as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I will follow up with you if I need to offline too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and the information that I get, you know, I'll be, you know, winnowing them down to the bins of the, you know, not just the themes, but if you can spot a recommendation that absolutely has a nexus to that report, that would be helpful too. Anything that we can do to support the recommendations with the current and existing and future work that people are already thinking about and doing, I think is really vitally important for the commission too.
Robin, I saw that you looked at them at one point. I didn't want to cut you off with your question.
I'm going to just quickly respond because I don't want to make you nervous, Diana, in managing the flow of the meeting. This has obviously been very intriguing, Kelly. Thank you very much. And went way beyond the time that we had allocated, which I think represents incredible interest. I put a number of things in the chat just in regards to my area, our area here of concern about public health, and primarily the pulmonary aspects or lung parts of that, but also other extended health issues. I can't hardly even keep up with the rapidity of literature that is coming out, and I put some of that into the chat. But there seems to be some indication that wildfire smoke may be even more toxic than some of the air pollutants, and I think that's an area. And I just want to thank you, and it's achieved what I wanted, which is that we start to have a collaborative relationship and work on some of these cross groups. There's much more to say, but I'll shut up.
Thanks, Robin. I mean, I really take this personally because I've had so many people affected by, you know, cancer and diseases from firefighting, and I don't think we're doing enough, you know, to protect firefighters, let alone, you know, public health and the impacts that we're having on people. So I think it's ripe for these conversations to start having these conversations, and how do we change? We're still doing the same things that we did 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I'll be honest with you. So I had to participate in medical standards to continue with my job as a wildland firefighter. And right there towards the end, I was told that I had a reduced lung capacity, doing a spirometer testing every 3 years. So the data is there, the information that's gathered, who knows how to even access that, but it's just a tidbit of information for you that this is a standard that is required for your quote unquote fitness for duty, but there's so much more information that could probably be drawn from that in terms of, hey, how is this really affecting firefighters and their health long term? And no one's reporting on that. I mean, we're starting to see, there's a guy by the name of George Broyles, dear friend of mine, for his entire career, have been trying to, you know, put the research and the science behind the impacts, the smoke impacts to wildland firefighters. And so I think that there's an opportunity again to pull all this together and say definitively that these are major health concerns that we need to address. And what does it mean? Do we do things differently? You know, I think the door is wide open for the dialogue, and I think you're right, Robin, that it's the conversations and the collaboration and the partnerships that are going to be most important going forward. And then coming up with actions, and how do we change?
Well, thank you so much, Kelly and Robin. Are there any other questions or thoughts? Kelly? Well, this was time extremely well spent, and we will follow up with an email with more agenda items. But Kelly, thank you so much for your time today and for all of the work that you're doing, and with all the hats that you're wearing and all the issues that you're working on. They're also important, and really grateful for that.
Thank you, Kelly. Look forward to reading the report.
Yeah, my honor and pleasure to be here with all of you. It's this is a very, very important group, and it's near and dear to my heart is both firefighter and public health. So I'm always willing to collaborate and give presentations if I can, you know, help amplify your work or connect you with other individuals on the commission. I'm more than happy to do that. You know, again, my background is a practitioner, and, you know, representing wildland firefighters. So, but I'm so intrigued by the work that all of you are doing, and I'm happy to help amplify that in any way I can.
Thank you so much. And you know, Robin said, definitely the start of a conversation.
Okay, great. I'll be in touch with you. You know, I've got a couple of things coming up right after this call, but thank you for the invite, and thank you all for your time today. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, Natalia, for making this happen. And we'll follow up with an email too, with agenda items for the regular agenda. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. And I'm, Diana, I'm not able to see everything in the chat. Is there any way that you can share that with me? Because there's some great links in there. It'd be